Sean, you've written that design is as much about storytelling as problem solving, which I completely agree with. How do you make carbon conscious design feel like part of a cultural narrative rather than just science or data?
For us, we're sort of different compared to everything else in the world. We tell stories. That's kind of human superpower. And I think no matter where you are, the ability to be able to connect with somebody is super dependent on the ability to be able to tell a story with them and them understand that story. I was doing a project and it became blatantly obvious to me for the federal government, actually. And I was working for Customs, Borders, and Protections. Our project was a border station crossing, and everything, 9/11 just happened. This is 2002, 2003. And I would go down and start to talk about, we need to restore these wetlands for the Akwesasne Nation. And I would have the Customs and Border Protection people stand up at the table. I had this one person stand up and said, no matter what I said, it wasn't landing. And then what I found was that they would tell me stories about conditions that had happened to them. And so I started showing them how, I started not talking about the environment. I started talking about how these different types of environments, the wetlands, could actually work to help them create a safer place and happier people coming through. And by telling the stories about the wetlands, I actually was able to connect with them, because there's a lot of things from that perspective that actually make the place safer, rather than telling them it's super important because we destroy the wetlands and we need more of them. No, it's actually an amazing place to have people actually experience, so they're happier, and I'll tell you how we can make it more secure. And I think that was the first time I started telling stories back to somebody rather than the data, that I was successful. And then I realized, okay, Customs and Borders Protection has a culture. We all have cultures, right? If you can connect to something that's important to them and then talk about the things that will make it better for them, carbon's in the background, and that's okay, because you're connecting with them and they're understanding something else that's really brilliant about what you're wanting to actually do.
Pascale, can you share an example where community input directly shaped the carbon approach in a project?
Sure, and I appreciate this conversation about language. And it's one thing for us to talk to the community and society, but it's also another to empower them with the vernacular to kind of engage in the conversation of the built environment, where we're not hitting them up with some fancy architectural terms, but there's actually ones that they can relate to, they can understand deeply and make decisions every day that allows it to really connect. The community was really worried about displacement. They were worried about making opportunities for them and maybe even having a site that's accessible. So for us, before the project kind of happens and comes to fruition, because in DC, there's a lot of regulatory processes that you have to go through, and it takes time. So instead of the site staying as this boarded up lot that's emptied or a parking lot, we actually created an interim retail village that is mass timber. Now, when we did that, that was able to push some sustainability goals on the site and also get the approval agencies familiar with this typology and this product, which then we started to understand what their heart palpitations were so that we can be more strategic and stealth when we do the larger project. But then also, this project itself is a community space. It's a way of telling the community, today, this site is for you. Get ready. This is your area. This is where we want you to be. And then instead of us telling, we also was able to create retail pavilions for local businesses who've never had a brick and mortar, or in this case, wood and glass, structure before, right? And so the client actually created this class that actually teaches them about running a successful business and their patrons and creating community programming. It's epic. But one of my favorite parts about it is because of the scale, we were also able to hire a local, smaller scale general contracting company who now got fancy with our drawings, our details, and so that when the larger project actually comes to fruition, they are best positioned for it. So I say all of that is, sometimes we talk about advocacy and architecture and sustainability. It can be something that's quite tangible, something that people experience and say, this is what sustainability means. No offense, that is cool, but it's nice to also walk into a space and understand and breathe and feel the difference between what it is to build in a way that heals versus a way that harms.
How do you build that same sense of permanence into product innovation at Fisher Paykel?
Very much starting with deeply understanding where we think the future's going. We have this idea of what we call the changing world, and we have 5 constructs that sit underneath that. So one is sustainability is shaping the future. Technology is radically changing the world. Healthy living is the new luxury. Really dialing into the changes in the built environment and understanding how people live in the environments that our products operate in. So those 5 concepts are what we challenge our team to go out and learn about with our customers and our users and our partners. And rather than technology shaping the things that we push out, it's really understanding what those inputs are and using them to shape the technology that we think is going to create value for our customers and our partners. So I think that's that out in rather than in out. I think the second element is that you have to make choices, and often we jump to the trade-offs too early. We want to improve efficiency, but we have to give something up. So not accepting the trade-off or opposing constraints that force creativity and innovation, I think is a really critical part of that. You've got to have some pretty big audacious goals. And I think when we started in 2020, looking at how we're going to reduce our per appliance carbon emissions by 50% by 2030 and 90% by 2050, I think there was a pretty tall mountain to climb. But once you put those goals out there and you force the constraints to change the way you think, all of a sudden new opportunities come up. People come up with creative ideas. So that constraints theory combined with big goals, I think it's a super powerful approach. It's a really, really big problem, decarbonisation, and we can all get distracted on thinking we're doing things that are, yes, they're meaningful, but really are they the big levers that are going to make a change? And I think the challenge that we try to apply back to ourselves, are we doing the big stuff? Are we putting the right effort, the right investment, the right focus on the big things?
Kai, I wanted to throw it to you just from your personal position of storytelling and how important it is to you and the team as well. Can you comment on that a little bit?
The word sustainability, or the word of just being more sustainable than someone else, was so culturally driven. And in America, there was like a lead kind of like checklist. And if you had like bamboo flooring and recovered yogurt container kind of countertops, you were being very sustainable. In Germany, it was if you had a white lab coat and you were driving some kind of building maintenance kind of like software, and the shades were coming down as the cloud was like leaving the sun, and the shade would go back up when the cloud went back over the sun, and you just like fine-tuned a building. Then in Denmark, they were just putting on sweaters and riding bicycles and going, we're sustainable. It wasn't a science, it wasn't a checklist, it was just being Danish. You make decisions every single day that either is using resources or using less resources. And then it became clear to me that these terms and these things are very culturally driven and values. And then that was just something that, as I've worked now in a Danish company for the past 20 years, in different places, we are telling stories through the Danish perspective, through the Danish storytelling of what it means to be resource conscious, to be thinking about the next generation, and to make decisions. And I have a lot of sweaters in my closet.
I bet you do.
All black.
Good. Maybe. Icelandic sweaters that are black. Yes.
Permanence and longevity, like you mentioned, is central to interiors. How do you fold that into both the design process and your conversations with clients?
One of the mantras in our studio is timeless interiors. We're really not interested in trendy interiors or what's going on at the moment. We're certainly not interested in fast fashion. I think the best example is a project that we did 20 years ago. If you walked into that project today, it would be as relevant as it was then. This is lasting work, lasting interiors, and this is very much our mindset working with the architects. How is this project going to be timeless? In 20 years, how is it going to look? How is it going to function?
What's the most important shift the design world must make in the next 10 years to cut carbon and create lasting impact?
In interiors, luxury was never at odds with the environment. It's always been on the same path.
Talk about culture before data. I think we're too involved with data.
Design with community and not at community and for community, but with them, and really make it authentic and make it something meaningful.
It's radically lift the level of system design and innovation to accelerate decarbonisation, and its emphasis on the system design. It's how all the pieces fit together that's ultimately going to make a difference.
Over to you, Kai. Closing statement.
I can't wait to have that cup of coffee from the Venice estuary in November when I'm back in Venice.
All right, awesome.
Well, that's a wrap, guys. Can we please give a massive round of applause to our panelists? Thank you so much for your insights.